This is an orientation to scripting with the Rangecast player. So what are scripts? We'll start by discussing views. In the Rangecast player there is a control where you can select what view you'll view the player in, and this changes what channels are shown on your player and how they're arranged. For example, the Play All channels will have each channel in a system, each on its own button. Or you can go to options such as, in this case, we have one for Dallas that shows some Dallas channels, or one called Towns that groups content by town and agency type. Many of the views are created automatically. For instance, all channels will have each channel that's accessible to you through the Rangecast player, and then individual counties will be broken out onto their own buttons, again with each channel in that county on the player, as well as several ways that the content can be grouped, like this one here that groups content by town system-wide. In many cases it's useful to create additional views that let you focus on a specific bureau, a specific region, specific agency type, or some other customizations, setting certain channels into a priority mode that are beneficial for your particular application. So it's important to be able to make views that do exactly what you want to do in the Rangecast player. And scripting is the most powerful and versatile and flexible way of doing this. So that's what this video is going to be illustrating, is how this is done. The core concept is that a script will define a view by rules. For example, the Dallas view has a rule that says include all the channels that are from Dallas. So even if at some point in the future some additional channels are added to the player, channels in Dallas that are not presently available, they would automatically come into the Dallas view without doing any additional work, because the view is defined as a rule that says include everything from Dallas. Or you can have a rule, for instance, fire dispatch, that shows all of the fire dispatch channels system-wide. And so once again, if a new channel is added or if a channel is removed, the view will automatically adapt to reflect those changes. So there's advantage in defining views by rules instead of explicitly saying this button will have this channel, this button will have these three channels, because that's less versatile when things automatically change. However, it is possible to work at that level and explicitly say, for instance, you want to have all of Dallas Fire, but this one channel broken out on its own button or something like that. That's the advantage of rules, is that they work in that kind of a fluid way. So we'll look at some examples of how views work. The scripts are usually stored in the hub's administration section, and under the option here titled Script. In this case, we're looking at the DFW system I was viewing in the player, and we have three views defined here called Dallas, Fort Worth, and DPS. And we'll go into the grammar of how these work, but the thing to see to begin with is that each view the definition is in fact quite short, just one line of text, and that it's available to the hub administrator under the script button. And any view that's defined in this box will be available to any user who is using your license. So if your license is through DFW, you would get these views available in your player. And you can customize to your particular system in that way. And coming back to the player, you can see those three views are presented right here in the player. These are one-line views, which are fairly short. It's possible to also have views that are substantially more complex than this, and we'll discuss some of those as well. But because in many cases you can accomplish what you want with a one or two or three line view, we'll start by discussing some of those applications and how that's done. When you're working with views, it's often useful to prototype that in the player and see what your view is going to come out like. And that can be done on the Options Preferences page. You have to be in advanced mode for this. You need to switch into the advanced level if you're not already there. And if you scroll down to Content Selection under Changes, there is an option here called Advanced View Configuration Scripting that opens up a box. And you can enter the rules for a view directly into this box, apply changes, and then go look at it and see how it works. And this is a good way to refine your view and do the editing work on it, make sure it does what you want before you make it go live. And you can then copy and paste whatever you've prepared here that's working for you over into the script box here to make the and then saving that to make it go live. There's a Save to Script button at the bottom here, and if you make any changes, make sure to push the Save to Script to save your changes at the end. In addition, there's also some useful references here at the bottom of that page. There's an FAQ about the scripting language, the commands that are available, what they do. And there's also, we'll see in a few minutes, use for a geocode database that tells you the codes like TX0201 and tell you that's the code for Dallas. In general, when you're looking at a one-line view like this, it starts with the word view. Then it has the name of your view. That's the name that will appear in the player. We'll go back here to the player in this drop-down list. And then there's a little arrow symbol. It's the little left bracket symbol, the greater than less than pair. And then after that, you have a code. And what that is saying is to feed into your Dallas view any channel that has the property of TX0201. We'll discuss in a minute what the properties of channels are, what kind of things you can put in that space. But it's a way of feeding specific content into a view. And if you had a view that was defined through multiple lines, you'd usually put like a space between it, and then you would write out the rest of what you had, leave a space at the end, and you can start the next view. It's flexible in that way. Also, it's acceptable to have spaces inside your name of a view. As you can see there, Fort Worth has a space on it. The most common kinds of things to use out here in this field are a geocode, which refers to a state, a county, or a city, a specific jurisdiction, an agency type, which would be like fire or police, a channel code that identifies, or called a channel ID, that identifies a particular channel, or a group code that defines a group of related channels. So we'll look at each of those concepts and see where the codes come from and how they're used. In this case, we have two geocodes, TX0201 for Dallas, TX0301 for Fort Worth, and also another agency here, which is agency 00071. Department of Public Safety, I believe that is. And so we'll look at where you'd find each of those codes from. There's several places you can look. One of them is in the programmer. If you're on this administration screen, there's the channel reception editor here. So I'll open this up here in a new tab. And if you load the channel list, it takes a minute to come up. There's information about the channels in there, and that'll be useful for seeing things. Other places you can get things. On the FAQ, we'll open that up also into a new tab here. And this FAQ is fairly technical. This is more of a formal definition of how the language works. Feel free to go through it and see what the options are. You'll find options in here that go beyond what I'm discussing in the video. But there is down here a reference list of agency codes. So opening that up, these are the codes that are being used. So for example, F1 for fire dispatch, and N for news media, R for railroads, S for schools, things like that can be used. It's also possible to use, like in the case of fire, if you want to refer to all fire, not just specifically dispatch, TAC, or talk, you can use just an F by itself to express that. And we'll be using these codes in a few minutes. You'll see how that works in practice. Inside the programmer, I'm going to switch here to just showing what's in the programming to make a somewhat shorter list. You can get a list of all the channels and that are set up for reception in your system. And on this list, I want to point to a couple of things in particular. Is we have the agency type code here. That's like we were just seeing. So F2 is a fire tactical channel, for example. And we have a geocode over here, like TX4400 is a code for channels in Hunt County. I should note that if you want to refer to Texas as a whole, you can use TX. If you want to refer to the county as a whole, including all of the local jurisdictions inside the county, you can go to like TX44. And then if you want to refer to a specific town inside, you can refer to, like, for example, Frisco is TX0804. But if you wrote down just TX08, you get the entire county. If you put, like here, TX4400, you're getting Hunt County as a jurisdiction itself. That will not include any towns inside the county. If you wanted that, you just do TX44. But this gives you, for each of the channels, it shows you your geocode. So if you know you want to look up a particular city, you can just do a Control F in here and find it. Like if I wanted to find, for example, Grapevine, I could do a Control F and look for Grapevine. Here we are, and that's TX0306. So if I want to look up a code for a particular city, that's a place I can go find it. In addition, these channels are organized into what's called a system group channel hierarchy. It's a fairly conventional way of organizing channels, and those codes are also shown here. So for example, here we have a number of channels that's in fire channels in Collin County. And if I wanted to refer to all of these channels together, I can use the second of the two codes up here in yellow, the H code. This is a system code. This will refer to a lot of other channels as well. Often if it's a trunk system, it will refer to the entire trunked radio system, which may include channels that are not really very much related to each other. And if I want to refer to a particular channel, I can use the channel ID over here, like this Allen Fire channel right here. It would be code T019071. If I wanted to refer to all of these channels together, I could just use the H00110 code. And this will all make a little more sense once we start seeing how these codes are used. You don't have to worry very much about thinking about the channels in this way. You come to it with a question. I want this particular channel. What's the code for it? What do I write down? And you can find it all here. So going over to the player. So I'll show an example with what we were just looking at there for how this could be used. If I go into the scripting area, and let's just make a couple of scripts here. So let's say I'm going to go back over here to this list. We want this all these on a view. We want to make it just these Collin County fire channels. We could take that code and copy and paste it, and come over here and forget the spelling there. Okay. So let's say we want to call it Collin Fire. And there we go with like that. And I'll do apply changes. Now when I come back here to the player, there will be a new Collin Fire option, and that will have all of these channels. That's all the channels that were listed as part of the Collin County Public Safety Fire block right here, and those are all now on the player. And you saw we did that with just one line here. We can go back and reopen it. It'll still be there. We did that one line, and that brought in all those channels. If I wanted to make a view, and let's find a little bit of a let's go look at Dallas, if we can find some channels here. So let's say we want to take this Dallas group, but now let's say we just wanted to have just these top two channels, Central Business District and Helicopter Unit. I could copy these two channel codes now. We'll call this Dallas Test. That's one code. And here's the other code. We'll copy and paste that one over too. Now I'll do apply changes again. Come back over here, And now we'll have a Dallas test view that has those two specific channels shown, and only those two. And the takeaway from that is both that you can refer to particular channels when you're defining one of these, and that you can put multiple options up here. So if I wanted to, for instance, do a view that had Dallas and Fort Worth together and nothing else, I could put their codes in, which is TX0201, TX0301. And now when I come back over here, this view here will have all of Dallas and all of Fort Worth, but nothing else on it at all, just those two cities. So looking at that again, what we did there is you can pick and choose just the content you want to put on a view in that way, and that's very useful if you're working with a particular bureau and you want to receive, say, everything in 2 counties, or if you some particular cities, or let's say you want everything in this county plus you want state highway patrol, which is going to be on some group code. You can put those together and just like little building blocks and put in just the content you want. So let's look at some other things we can do here that are like that. Let's say we wanted Dallas fire. We would be able to put in TX0201 as the code for Dallas. There's an extra thing you can do here in the grammar. You can put a plus afterwards right against the code and put a second criteria, like F is the criteria for fire. That will pull out all the Dallas channels, but restrict that to just the fire content. So if we apply that and come back over here, we'll see there's now a Dallas fire option, and that has Dallas fire channels and nothing else. So just putting that back on the screen so you can see how we were constructing those views. Now, another way you can do things, like let's do some work with Tarrant County here, which is TX03 is the code for that. So I start off and make a view like that, and I come over and I go to Tarrant as a new view. I'll have lots of channels from Tarrant County, and from all the cities, the county channels, all of them. And this is the county that includes Fort Worth. Large city, has lots of channels in Fort Worth specifically. So let's say I wanted to make a view for Tarrant County, but the county outside of Fort Worth is a city. I'm viewing them from an operational perspective as someone listening to the radio. I'm viewing Fort Worth as really something different than the neighboring cities, the outlying regions in the county. So I want to take Tarrant County, but I want to block the Fort Worth content specifically. And this is where I'll start showing what you can do if you have a view that's more than one line. And views can get fairly complex if you want to. You can, I've done some that have like 10 or 15 lines on them. And one line takes care of many situations. But we'll try building this out and start seeing what you can do by adding some extra commands. Any command you put after the view will be taken as part of the same view until you hit the next view line or the end of your file. So what I can do here if I want to block Fort Worth is there's a command called block that I can type, and then the code for that particular what I want to block. So if I want to block the Fort Worth, which is TX0301, I can do that. And now when I come back to look at my Tarrant view, now I have the county, lots of towns in the county, but no Fort Worth. That's blocked that one jurisdiction from what's showing in my view. And I could also, go the other way on things. There's also a parallel command called only that I can use to let through only specific content. So if I made this be, for instance, only F, that would allow through only fire content. So now we have instead of excluding Fort Worth, now we've got Fort Worth back again, but now we're restricting ourselves to just fire. So block and only are a pair of commands that are related to each other. Block will take any matching channels and will take them away, hide them, make them not visible, just take them away from your view. And only will keep only the channels that match the rule. Every channel, we go back and look at the programmer here again, every channel has a number of properties. Every channel has a channel ID, a group ID. I'll click near these to make it more visible in the video. It's got a channel ID over here. It's got a group ID shown in the yellow above, a system ID, a agency type, and a geocode. And any of those codes can be used. So you can put together combinations that has, say, this group, but exclude or block these 3 channels. Or I could take, let's find a large group to illustrate this. Like, well, here's an interrupt. Those are all interrupt channels. I'm looking for something with a little more variety to it. Like, here's a huge group. What is this one here? This is Crowley. So here we have the Fort Worth Regional Radio System, which is a trunk system, and the group layer within that is an individual town of Crowley. And we've got everything in here: emergency management, fire, medical, police, lots of agency types. And let's say I wanted to make a Crowley button, but I wanted to exclude the emergency management channels. So what I could do to do that, so once again, I'll copy and paste the group code from up here. So I'll put this up to the top where it's easier to see. So make a key view called Crowley, and we'll feed it that group. But now I will block the emergency management channels. And so now when I come over to Crowley, I'll have that entire group, but without the emergency management. You will see we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 lines, comes over 2 channels. If I were to go over here and take out the block E, so I just had that, and I came back over, now I've got some, like 4 extra channels. Those are the emergency management channels added in. Now, let's say I wanted to put together, in that case also, you know, with Crowley, I was referring here to it by the group code, which got all of these channels on the trunked radio system. But there might be channels in that town that are not part of this particular system. It might be conventional channels, just something else that's not part of this particular group. So if I really was, I was thinking of this as I want Crowley as a town, I might have gone over here and taken the geocode instead. And I could, if I wanted to, modify what I had just made by going here and adding that geocode. Now, by having 2 things on the line, that will any channel that matches either of the criteria will get included. So that'll catch everything in that group, but it'll also catch any other channel that's marked as Crowley. Now, in this case, everything in the group was geocoded the same way as that city. So I really could have just done the geocode by itself, but this is more to show the concept and apply changes and go back. And I think this is a little bit wider than it was, so I think I have in fact picked up some additional content that was outside of that group. If I wanted to put together some specific towns, like let's say I wanted to do go back to the scripting here. Let's say I wanted to put together specifically the towns of Arlington and Grapevine. I could get the codes for those, call it AG. And actually at this point I'll show another way you can get geocodes different from what I was just showing. There's also a geocode database down here. And if you open that tab, that pulls up a little database search utility. So I could choose, for instance, like these are these Arlington and Grapevine are in Tarrant County. So I could search for the word Tarrant over here, And now I get all these matches of jurisdictions that are associated with that name. Now, in this case, most of these are Tarrant County in Texas. We've got one entry in here for the Tarrant Housing Authority in Alabama. I have the same keyword. If I need to be more specific in my search, I can specify a particular state or things like that. But in many cases, just typing in the name you want's enough. So I can see here that Arlington is code TX0302 and Grapevine is code TX0306. So if I was to go over to our scripting place, I can type in those codes like that, apply changes, go back over here, I'll find the AG view, and there we are with Arlington and Grapevine. This kind of thing is really useful if you have a bureau or someone who wants to focus on a specific region. Just enter the geocodes, you've got a view, focuses just on that one section, you're done. So that kind of thing can be really simple. Now we'll turn here to more complex things you can do with these scripts. And one of the most common things to do is combine content onto a single button. Because you may have, if you're covering a very wide region, like let's say I go back here to all channels again, there is a lot of content here. There's a lot of individual channels. And even if I go over here where I don't see the transmissions panel and show it arranged this way, it's still more than fits on the screen at one time. And that can be unwieldy. So it's common to want to combine content onto buttons and organize those. So we'll look at how that's done. And some of the ways of doing that, you just explicitly name a button and say, I want a button to be called this and have these channels. Sometimes you want to express an idea, like the Towns view has every, go back over here and look at that one again. The Towns view has every town on its and agency type on its own button. So we'll have, for instance, Addison Fire and Addison Police on different buttons, but it's all organized that way. Now, let's say I want to do something like that, but over a smaller region. So if I go into scripting, let's say I wanted to take let's take Tarrant County here. Let's say I wanted to arrange the buttons here. One thing I could do is I could scan city. I'll explain what this means in just a second here. This is a new command here we're seeing called scan. And what the scan command does is it's going to take any matching channel and do something with it relating to how the buttons are arranged. In this case, I've typed all, and that means it's going to match all the channels in the view. If I had typed, for instance, F, it would match only the fire channels. If I typed F space P, it would match all the fire and police channels. And you can use all the same rules there you would up here for specifying what goes into a view. And by the way, if you want all the channels in a view, you can do the same thing here. You could have typed that if you want all the channels to come into your view. So going back to this way. And what's inside the quotes is a button label. And anything that starts with a percentage sign is a special rule that will drop into the button label something about the channel. So we'll just try this. You'll see how it works, and then we'll come back and look at it some more. So when I push apply changes and come back over, if I go to Tarrant now, you'll see that I have a button for each town. Now, in this case, the buttons aren't well sized. I'm running out of space. The buttons start out fairly small because small lets you get the most content in. But in this case, I'm using names that are longer, so I want to make it wider. And there's a way you can adjust that. Let's move this up to the top so it's right there when we come back to this all the time. So there's just moving that up. I can type a command here called width, and this will adjust the width of the buttons. So let's call it width 160. Now when I come back, the buttons are wider. Now, what I've done here, you'll see that we've got all these towns in Tarrant, all with one button. All the content that's present on each of those is playing on its own, combined onto its own button. If I so what my rule here is done with the percentage sign city is it substitutes for each channel the name of the city. If I was to put here instead agency, which is another keyword, and I come back, now I have each agency type on its own button. In this case, the emergency medical services, emergency operations center, fire, interoperability, etc. And so the FAQ has a list of what these, let's see which tab I have that on at this point. The FAQ has a list of these kinds of special commands there. All these are available as things you can use to drop in there. But we'll stay with just a few of them for illustrating the concepts. Now, let's say I wanted to take in Tarrant County, I want to take Fort Worth. I want to take Fort Worth and split it out so I had fire and police and all on different buttons. But for the rest of the county, I wanted to combine each city onto its own button. What I'd be able to do that is add a rule here that says city agency. And I'll match on this just Fort Worth, which is TX0301. Now when I come back, I'll have Fort Worth split out, EMS, emergency operations, fire, police. But all the other towns are all shown, all the content from that town combined onto a single button. So that's an example of how a multi-line view rule works. Is we're starting off here with the first line just specifies this is the name of the view, here is the channels we're working with. We have then one line at the end here that is setting the width of the buttons as so how it's presented. We've got two lines in the middle that are defining how the channels are arranged. And because of the fact that this one catches all channels, but then this one afterwards catches the Fort Worth channels, because it's in that order, we get the layout we have. Now, if I was to reverse the order of these, like we'll go back over here first, you see how this is. Here we've got it with each town on its own button, except Fort Worth is broken out. If I had done those in the opposite order, we would get a different effect. So let's take that rule and put it above this one. If we were to apply changes on this, what will happen is every town, including Fort Worth, is on its own button. Fort Worth is no longer split out. And the reason for that's important to understand for working with multi-line scripts. What we have going on here is each channel is run through these rules in order, and how the rule works affected. So let's say we got a Fort Worth fire channel. It'll hit this rule. Yes, this is a Fort Worth channel, so it will put it onto a button that has the city and agency name. But the next rule then says this is hits all channels. So the same Fort Worth fire channel will hit this rule as well, and then I'll put it onto a button that has just the city name. And so you need to think about the order, the processing order. What happens, then what happens, and what happens, and where does it wind up? And this is useful because you can have a situation like, let's say, in the order we had it, we want a general thing done for all of our content. We want every city put onto its own button. You can just do that, and then you can carve out the exceptions. You say, well, actually for Fort Worth, I want this thing to happen. Or if you had a particular channel, you could split out that channel onto its own button. Like let's find something that's in the Fort Worth police region. Let's see. So if I go up to the top here, I'll choose to look at Tarrant County. Lots of counties here. And let's take police dispatch channels. So now I'm just looking at some police dispatch channels. And I can find, like here, this sounds like it might be a busy channel, Fort Worth Central. Let's see. Just skimming through there for a second. Okay, let's take this channel right here. I could take this code for this one channel, and I can come back to the script if I want to, and I can add a new line here. And notice here I'm not doing a percentage sign thing. I'm actually giving a name to a button. I can do that. This will take this one channel and peel it out and make its own button. So right there we are, Fort Worth PD Central that I've split out. And the advantage of that shows the advantage of working with scripting, that you can have a very general rule you apply to all the channels and get more specific to the point that at the end you're doing particular things with particular channels that are really important to you and giving them just the label you want, things like that. And you can do the same kind of thing here with not using the percentage sign but directly giving a name. So I could, for instance, let's say I want to put all the emergency operations channels onto one button. I could put in a rule like that says take all the emergency operations channels and put them on a button called emergency. But this will execute before this, so the Fort Worth channels will still get split off onto their own buttons. So I come over here, and there's our emergency button, and that'll contain any channels that were emergency channels in this county that weren't in Fort Worth specifically, but the Fort Worth emergency channels still go on their own button down here. This is probably a good point to mention also the button manager. This is a tool under the bookshelf type icon up here, the channel list. If you go over here to the wrench icon, you can now get a list. Like let's say I want to know what's in my emergency button. I can click there, and now this will list out all the channels that are inside that one button. So if I want to see what is behind those, this is a way of doing so. You go to the button manager, and then you can choose any of the buttons and see what's inside them. And you can also use that kind of scripting tool to express certain channels differently. Like a common thing that might be done is, let's say here let's make this simpler again for a minute. Let's copy this rule and so what this will do is it'll catch at the end actually I want ones on those, the fire and police dispatch channels F1 and P1 that are inside Fort Worth, and it will put them individually onto their own button because the frequency is unique for each channel. So if I do that and come over here, now we have for the dispatch channels only are all automatically split out onto their own buttons. So this kind of tool can be used to quickly take your most important channels, like if you've got some city that has 5 dispatch channels, and split them all out without having to actually go in and think about what each of those channels are, what you want to call them. You can just do that automatically with a rule in one line like that. Another useful concept is the use of priority mode. Like let's say I wanted to take these dispatch channels and make them priority channels. I could use the word priority. Well, it spilled over just on the display onto a second line, but it's really all one line there. I could take, oh, I misspelled priorities. Let's go through and fix that. There. Now if I come over here, those dispatch channels I just mentioned are all put in priority mode while everything else is in normal mode. And the concept there is that where we were using scan, you can actually refer to any of the levels of channels. You can also use off. So if we do off there and come down here, you see now all these channels start out off except for the ones you specifically want on. And the words that can be used in that place, off is to have the channel visible but turned off, where you can click the button, turn it back on. Hide, which means make the channel not show at all, just take it off the display. It's not even off because you can't turn it on, it's just gone. That's hide. So off and hide. And scan is the normal level of scanning. Priority is a priority mode in scanning. That's if you're in normal monitoring modes, keeping up close to real time. It'll preferentially play those transmissions immediately when they come in. They'll jump the queue ahead of other channels. And there's also another word you can use called low, L-O-W, for low priority. That's lower than normal scan. So if something has to get dropped because there's just too much content coming in to stay up at real time, those will get dropped first, but only if it's needed. So hide, off, low, scan, priority. It's a set of levels of importance to channels, and you can use any of those keywords at the start of one of those lines. Instead of width, another option you could use to control the width of things is columns. So I could say columns 4. And now there will be 4 columns on the display. Even if I go to the wide form, there's still 4 columns. So you can fix and specify the number of columns on your display instead of setting the width of the buttons. You can do that either way. This is a good point to discuss where channel names come from. If I go back to play all channels, you'll see that every one of these channels has some kind of a short name associated with it. And those don't automatically come out of the channel database. Those have to be manually entered in the programmer. And to show you where those come from is, let's free this back up to show all channels instead of just Fort Worth Police like I had a moment ago. Actually, I need to go to the Constellation link to see this right here. Is every one of these channels has in this button column, this is the short button label, some text that's been entered to describe it. And without going into a lot of detail over it, the concept is someone would come in here for each of these individual channels and would type in a name and then go down to the end, press apply changes, and then go over to save options and press save, and that would register those changes. And that's a somewhat time-consuming process, and it's not always necessary. Like, it's not uncommon to have on a trunk system to find that there's a huge number of TAC channels in a department, and you don't necessarily want all those on their own button. And if you're never going to put a channel on its own button, there's no need to give it a name. The default, if one isn't entered, is the frequency or talk group number, which is a unique identifier in general. So this doesn't always need to be done. In the case of this hub, it has been done. And you're certainly welcome to make those changes as well, to set the names of channels. Those are the little short names that appear on the buttons, if you want to do that. And where this is relevant in terms of scripting is if you'll see if I go over to let's find our scripts again. These are the scripts that are in there already saved. We've got this Dallas Fort Worth ones, for instance. These are one-line scripts. They just refer to a town. And if I go over to the player and I go to, say, that Dallas view, you'll see that I have every Dallas channel on its own button. Now, this looks easy to understand because someone's gone through and named each of these channels. So there's already a name in place. But if that work hadn't been done, you might find that this shows only frequencies, and that's possibly okay. If you're dealing with a small number of channels, you might just know, okay, that's what 154.25 means, is that's a particular source. But if you're using a view where you're doing something that automatically names the buttons, like these ones here that use %city, then it's never going to show whatever the name of that channel was. Because if I were to go to, for instance, this Tarrant view, which has a whole bunch of different ways things are arranged, if I go to that Tarrant view, what I see on the screen is that we're just seeing the town names, or we're seeing the town names and an agency type, or the town name and agency type and a frequency. And all of that information is coming out of the metadata describing the channels. It's not coming out of that information that was typed into that Constellation page where you had to go through and name every single channel. That never shows up on this. So if you're going to be using views that you're creating in this method, then there's no reason to go and name those channels over on this page, because they don't come through the player. On the other hand, if you're going to be using views that don't name the channels, those can be very helpful to have those names in place. And for example, if I go to the scripting, I think I had some that had a couple of towns, like this Arlington and Grapevine one. That one looks good because those channels are all individually named. And if I was to put a scan line here, this is an important point. If I was to do a scan line that did not have anything in quotes, like here we have, you recall in Tarrant County, this last line that did the priority, I'll go and show that again so we're up on the same page here. These are all the dispatch channels in Fort Worth, both fire and police, and they're all, in this case, put on buttons that has the town name, agency type, and the frequency to distinguish them. But if I was to modify this to not have quotes, so far every time we've seen a scanner, priority lines had a button name and a quote. If I don't do that, that's legal. I can just say priority in those channels, but what that will do is it will take those channels and put them onto their own buttons with the name that those channels are given over in the programmer. And I'll save that so you can see the results. Okay, now all those Fort Worth dispatch channels have the names that they were given over in the programmer. And those just carry through automatically because that's the default name for an individual channel. So unless I explicitly put something in quotes that says, here is how you name the button, here's how you combine the content onto a button, what will happen is every channel will show up on its own button with the name from the programmer. It's also possible to rename an individual channel in the programmer a couple of ways, or in the scripting a couple of ways. Like here, this Lockheed Martin Fire Department channel. I'm not sure what that is offhand, but we can go find out. Let's go to the programmer. I'll show you how you could have done this. So anyways, there's our channel. And it's got a channel code over here. And in the scripting, and this is not part of a view, this is just sort of general information. I could put up here short name for a channel, and I can give it some other name. So if I do that and I come down here, now that channel is called Lockheed. I'll go back and show you what I did there. Now you saw the result. Is I can take any channel, any individual channel in the system, put its short space channel ID space a name, and that will give that channel a button name that is known by. So that's a way I can go in and name particular channels without using the programmer to do it. I can put them directly in the script here. And there's some other things which I won't go into in the video, but are in the FAQ as well, involving the longer names that you see up here. It's possible to read, like the top line, the system name. Sometimes the system name is very long. You'd rather have something shorter. You can also rename how those display up top through similar kind of actions. Another important concept is how channels are arranged on the player. That so far we've been letting everything just fall out automatically, and that's to alphabetically sort the list, where A through Z, that's how everything shows up. If you want to specify a particular order, there's a concept called a sort key you can attach to those channels, and I'll show you some examples of how that works here. In this Tarrant County view, for example, we might say that these dispatch channels are particularly important. We want to have those right at the top of the list. And I'll discuss in a moment after I show you how it works, more specifically what it means. But I can put /1 at the front of that one. And here we've got Fort Worth channels that are different from those. Call those /2. And by doing just that, if I press Apply Changes and go back, what we'll have is these dispatch channels be the start of the list. Then we'll have the rest of Fort Worth. Then we'll have the rest of the county. So here we have all those dispatch channels at the top of the list. Then we have the rest of Fort Worth. Then we have the rest of the county. Now what's happened here is when I typed the slash, that and that comes in as the first term right after like scanner priority. It means I'm affecting the order in which content will present. And what comes after the slash is interpreted as, when it's sorting it, it prepends whatever text I put there to the channel name, and that goes into the sort order. So because I put /1, it means that these Fort Worth channels here were sorted as if what this actually said was 1 FW, etc. And then 1 comes before all the letters. And then these were marked with a 2, so those, as if I had written out 2 Fort Worth EMS. And again, 2 comes before the rest of the channels. So you can use that technique to drop content anywhere in a list you want. Now, it's sort of conventional to use numbers like /1, /2, /3 to specify the position, but it's not a alphabetic sort, it's an alphanumeric. So, for example, if you do /11, that comes before /2. So the easiest way to work with that is to choose to either do like one character like /1 or 2 characters /11 all the way through. But you can use that, and sometimes it's done to, if you want to specifically place like 20 channels in a particular order, you can have lines, scan /11 channel name, scan /12 space, channel ID, all the way down the list, and specify where you want them to go. Also related to that, and closely linked, is the concept of putting in a line break. Another command that's available is called new lines. And if you do a new lines, you can create a break in your page. So let's call everything else /3. So this will create new lines at the start of each of those blocks of channels. In this case, that was 4 wide, and there were only 4, so it's not very visible, but you see the line break there. So you can use that kind of thing to divide out and put in order content from a core city, and then the surrounding county, and then surrounding regions. And as you see in this particular example, where we've got all the dispatch channels in a core city split out onto their own channels, and then the rest of the city are broken out still to a lesser extent, and then the rest of the county all combined by town. You can have a graduation of level of differentiation. So your core city is really broken out by channel, but things further out are combined more. So you can really fine-tune that system to come out the way you want. Another common thing to do is combine tag channels. So for example, let's say I was going to let's make a new view to illustrate this one. What did I do? I did something that closed my window there. So let's say I'm going to give this the entirety of our 2 core counties, Dallas and Tarrant. And let's say I'm going to combine content generally by city. Let's see, is this what I want to do here? What I want to show is how you can take, like, for instance, if you've got a lot of tag channels, put them all into one button. So to do that, let's scan by city, or combine by city, all content, but then split out the two core cities each onto their own button. Okay, so what this will do is it will take all the content from those two counties, group it by button showing the city name, but then take the two core cities, Dallas and Fort Worth, and show each channel independently. There we are. So now you see we've got lots and lots of channels inside, especially Fort Worth, and the other towns are all grouped together nicely. Now let's say a lot of those are TAC channels and talk channels, and we don't need to have separate buttons necessarily for every one of those channels. So what I can do to make a shorter list, go back to this here, is after, I just deleted a 0 there, after this line here, I can put in something that will combine now agency 1, 2, 3 takes the agency type like a fire or a police, but if it's subdivided to dispatch, TAC, and talk, it'll divide it that way more specifically. And I'm going to do this for just the talk and TAC channels. And this long list here will match any channel that is a fire dispatch, fire talk, medical fire tactical, fire talk, medical tactical, medical talk, police tactical, police talk. You'll match any of those channels and put it onto a button that has the city name followed by the agency type. Now, this is not going to do quite what I want. I need to add one more line onto this, but I'm going to save this and show the result and show how it doesn't do what I want, and then come back and fix that. Apply changes. And now you see, let's find Dallas. Now instead of having a lot of, or Fort Worth, instead of having a huge number of Fort Worth channels, now for instance, all the Fort Worth fire TAC channels are all combined onto a single button. What this did that I don't want is this, in all of the surrounding towns, it's done the same thing. So for example, Crowley, instead of, it used to be one button for Crowley. Now we've got all these TAC and talk channels splattered all over onto their own buttons. We don't necessarily want that. So to fix that, this introduces a new command that's a useful command, which is called finish or continue. There's a pair, you can use either one depending on which way you want to do it. And what we really want to do here is we want to say only keep going if you're working in one of the two central towns. Just if you're dealing with a surrounding town like Crowley or Grapevine or something, just stop. You've got the channels on a button. Don't keep going. But you want to keep going and apply the following rules only to channels in Dallas or Fort Worth. So we have a command here called continue that says only keep processing the channel against following rules if it matches the criteria on the line. So we'll enter the Dallas and Fort Worth one. And we'll save that. Now when we come back here, we'll see that we've combined once again, we've combined the Fort Worth fire talk and fire TAC, but all these other towns up here are all just on their own button now. So we have constrained the splatter of, that we accidentally put in there by making the fire TAC and fire talk split only apply to Dallas and Fort Worth. A parallel command to that is called finish. Yeah, finish says for anything matching, stop, don't do anything else, but everything else goes through. Continue says only continue for what matches, everything else stops. You can use whichever one of those is appropriate if you're in that situation. One last thing to discuss is that a view can be based on another view. So let's say I have this DFW view, and it does lots of things I like, but I want to do one thing differently. I can start out, instead of, if I want to make a new view, I can call it DFW2, and I can, whereas in all the other cases I've shown what content's coming in, I can type a view name. I can type DFW right there. This will be based on, it'll make a copy of DFW, and now I can do something to it. So let's say I now want to put on priority the Dallas fire channels. This one, or dispatch channel, fire dispatch channels. So this is a view, it's only 2 lines here. It's called DFW2. It takes the DFW view exactly the way I made it, and it makes some changes in addition to it. So in this case, this next line says those buttons that have, or those channels that are the Dallas fire dispatch channels will go into priority state. So I can do apply changes, come back, go to DFW2, and I'll see the Dallas fire channels are in priority. It's the only difference there. DFW and DFW2. So if you have a view that does a lot of the stuff you want, you don't have to redo the work of saying the same thing again. You can just base it directly on what you just made. And related to that is there's a special command called touch. And what touch does is it will affect the channel in the described way, but it will not affect what channels are on one button. So you see up here we have, like for the outlying cities, are all combined onto a single button. If I say touch E, that'll touch any button that contains an emergency management channel, and it will make it priority. But it will keep the buttons exactly the way they were in terms of what was combined. So now every town that has an emergency management channel is in priority. That kind of thing is useful if you want to, especially changing the priority state. But you like your channel button layout the way you have it. You can just say, okay, the buttons that contain an emergency management channel, the buttons that contain a certain kind of content, put those in priority, but keep it all the way it was. So in overview, the concepts here is that it's very useful to add additional views that do particular things for you. And the recommended best way of doing that is through the scripting technique. Scripts are entered into the administration page for the hub. You can copy and paste down here, push save to save those changes. And you can test them out right in the player by going, you need to be in advanced mode to do this on the options page. You can test them out by going to the advanced view configuration scripting, enter things, try them out, make it come out the way you like it. When you're done with that, you can copy and paste it over onto the other screen. Be careful on it, just to, like if you've got a multi-line view, you want to keep all of this together. So if you already have this and you want to copy and paste some new things, don't accidentally like split this up and drop things in the middle. But that should be fairly intuitive. And there's, on the scripting page, there is a link to an FAQ that goes into more technical detail. And this is based on knowing a lot of these codes about these various geocodes, agency types, and the system group channel hierarchy. And you can find pretty much all that information in the FAQs down here or in the programmer by looking at the appropriate lines and portions of this page to find those codes.